Number 17. Being an Aspie is like walking through a pack of wolves, not a pleasant experience. If you think of it in terms of literally walking through a pack of wolves. By the way, this is number 17 of 32 things that we have what it's like to be an Aspie. We're going to go 17 through 24, do 8 of these. If I took time to spend 2 or 3 minutes on every one of them, 32, that would be, like an hour or two before you get done. All right, number 17 again, it's like walking through a pack of wolves, but got to keep this in mind. It is every day, all the time, every day, all day, just nonstop. You are always in a position of stress and trauma, always fearful that you are going to be pounced upon. Now, being pounced upon sometimes, particularly if you are a child, if you're a teenager, sometimes it is quite literal. I've not had much of that experience when I was a kid, but I know a lot of people with Asperger syndrome have been physically assaulted and bullied when they were kids, when they were teenagers. And it seems like the teen years are worst of any, and it's different for different people. But for me, not so much physical abuse, but more just being ignored, being the invisible man. I think I talked about that in the last presentation. When I was a kid, I remember watching black and white westerns and eventually color westerns, but we had a black and white TV, and so, I was like a teenager before I had a TV that was in color. But the plot of virtually every TV Western was the same. That is, the good guys opposed the bad guys. The good guys typically wore white hats, and the bad guys typically wore black hats, so that you could tell which is which. And if it wasn't white hats and black hats, well, the makeup department would make it very clear. So you'd watch the TV Western early on, you'd find out who the bad guy is and what he's up to, and the good guy who was after him, typically the sheriff, maybe somebody else, but the world view that I acquired from watching those TV Westerns. Maybe you can name a few of them if you're as old as I am. I never watched Gunsmoke. To me, that was too much for adults, but it had the same principle. And Matt Dillon wore a white hat. When I was born, there was a TV show called The Cisco Kid. And the Cisco Kid was the good guy, and he had a sidekick named Pancho, kind of like Batman and Robin, only they were cowboys. They were the good guys. And my older brother, who was 5 years older than I was, 5 years old when I was born, he decided that he would take on the role of the Cisco Kid. So guess who I got to be? I got to be Pancho. My uncles thought that was hilarious, so my nickname was Pancho. And sometimes if someone yells out Pancho, which doesn't happen very often, as you can imagine, I respond. That's one of my names, what people call me. I'm okay with it, but the point of all that is we tend to take on those perspectives as Aspies, those unreal world perspectives. So we see the world like we see a TV Western. And if you're too young to understand what I'm talking about, I'm pretty sure, not now, but later, you can find them on YouTube. Just type in TV Western. There's a bunch of them. One of my favorites, I think, was Maverick. What was that? It wasn't a Western, but Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett. Those were popular TV shows, but they all had the same thing. You have this world of good people and a couple bad guys, and there's some hero that goes after the bad guy. Every single episode I ever saw had that same basic, fundamental, underlying pattern, and that was my world view. Everybody came one of two types. You were either a white hat, good guy, or you were a black hat, bad guy. Well, it took me a long time to understand that the world isn't made of white hats and black hats, good guys and bad guys. It's made of people in gray hats. Some are darker gray than others, some are lighter gray. Some of the good guys, but everybody is a bad guy, and everybody has a little good guy in them, even the worst of the bad guys. But that was my world view. I just expected people to be good guys, but they weren't. And I had this silly notion that someday I would grow up and become an adult, and then I would get to live in this good guy world. Well, I did grow up, and guess what? There are no white hats. Nobody. Just none of us are white hats. We all wear gray hats. Just to, we're on a spectrum. Light gray for the good guys, dark gray for the bad guys, and our hats tend to turn colors based upon our behavior. That is an accurate worldview, but that's not the way Aspies tend to see the world. We still have this thing in the back of our heads that everybody's a good guy, but they're not. It's like walking through a pack of wolves and thinking you're walking through somebody's pet dogs, and you're shocked. You're amazed that somebody would do what they're doing. Now that I know is a bit of an exaggeration, and I think a lot of Aspies have learned very quickly that these are not somebody's pet dogs, that the world is a very unrepenting, can be a very brutal place to live. Number 18. We are low-hanging fruit for bullies. I've mentioned this a couple times in previous videos, and by the way, when this video is over at the very end, if you want to watch some of those, we got dozens and dozens of them. Some of the other things we talked about that I think would really help you, because pushing 70 years old, I've learned things over my life, and I'm sharing with people from my experience. I'm just drawing from what I learned, because I've been an Aspie all my life. All the Aspies have always been Aspies. We're born that way. And I've experienced things that other people are experiencing or have not yet experienced, but will if you're younger. So I'm just here to do what I can to help people out. Low-hanging fruit, bullies. It never stops. Never. Hard to believe, but it just doesn't. Wherever you go, whatever you do, there will always be bullies. Now, I hope that I never get to the place where I have to live in, what do they call them now? Rest homes, nursing homes. I remember when I was a pastor, there was a little old lady in our church, and she said that she didn't want to go to a nursery home. She meant nursing home, but that's the way she saw it. And one of the reasons is because people in nursing homes are, guess what? They're just people. They're all wearing gray hats. Not only the people who live there, but the staff. When I go to medical professionals, usually they are very courteous, because if they're not, they lose their jobs. The people are what they are. And as Aspies, we're living through that, and we find that somehow they just kind of, look, there's a guy in a very light gray hat. Let's pounce on him. Like the villain in the not a sitcom, but the TV Western. Maybe some of them were sitcoms. If they were, I think I missed that one. Roy Rogers was kind of funny sometimes. It wasn't intended to be. But we just kind of stick out. There's something about our mannerisms, our facial expressions, our behavior, the way that we talk or we can't talk. But we're just bully targets all the time, every time. And as you grow older, you learn to deal with it. You learn techniques and strategies, but it's always going to be there. And we tend to take that very personal, but you got to keep in mind that primates and humans tend to be, we tend to be very aggressive. And we have this social tier, this hierarchy, and we compete. And sometimes the competition is very brutal. And other people compete with other people. We don't understand that. At least I don't. Maybe you do. I can't figure it out. But they're all competing. They're all fighting all the time. All you have to do is drive down an interstate and watch how other people drive. For some reason, unbeknownst to me, they all want to get in front of each other. For what purpose? It's just human nature. That's the way people are. And it's not just driving, it's every aspect of life. We tend to compete. Well, Aspies, I think, tend to be less competitive, and we're just kind of there for to watch the movie. Only we're in the 3D movie set. There we are. And other people observe us not being very observant, not participating, and so we are easy target. and they try to defeat us. We call it social defeat because that raises them a little bit higher in the social hierarchy. And we are, by nature, programmed to be that way. When I say we, I'm talking about everybody, not Aspies necessarily. Because our social climbing program seems to be defective. I think it's got a bug in it. It just doesn't work as well. We don't, at least I don't. You may be different, but I'm really not interested in being at the top of the hierarchy. I'm not even sure how the hierarchy works. Now, I like being appreciated, and I always appreciate comments that are positive, and if somebody thinks I do something well, I like to hear about it. But that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about social climbing, that hierarchy. But it exists everywhere. Every place I've ever worked had that hierarchy. That, by the way, is one of the reasons that I found it near impossible to keep a job more than, 6 months. We just don't know how to compete. What is it like to be an Aspie? Well, to be an Aspie, with a few exceptions, is to have special interest. I was watching Temple Grandin on YouTube last night, and she was talking about an individual that, an Aspie who had a special interest with heated blanket controls, electric blanket controls. I can't imagine being obsessed with something like that, but we typically, again, with few exceptions, we all have something that we obsess over. Why is that? I don't know, but I know that it can make a positive contribution to the world. I'm telling you, if your electric blanket needs repair, guess who to go to? That woman who is obsessed, I think she said it was a woman who was obsessed with the control of electric blankets.
She was obsessed with electric blanket controls.
My guess is she could probably name every model, every brand, and knows how to fix every single one of them. I don't even own electric blanket. Come to think of it, I don't use blankets. I guess I'm kind of weird that way. I think I'm probably the only Aspie that doesn't, but there's something, well, we'll talk about that later. So the point of that is to point out that not everything about people with Asperger syndrome, not all of these traits are negative. Some of them are very positive, and having special interest tends to make the person who has Asperger syndrome an expert of at some level in that area that captures his or her interest. So it's kind of cool. And the way that I like to explain that is if I had a choice. And you may ask yourself this question too. If you had a choice, if I had a choice, would I change? And the answer is no, I'm perfectly happy being the way that I am. I'm glad nature made me the way that I am. I've got a purpose. I got a reason. There's a thing called symbiotic relationships that we all have with each other, all humans, all humanity. Everybody has a purpose, so this is, I don't see it so much as a disorder. Some people call it Asperger's spectrum disorder or high-functioning autism disorder. I think of it as a niche, or niche, if you prefer. It's just something that, this is my place. This is where I live. This is my home. This is the shell. Like a turtle. Every turtle has a shell. My shell is Asperger syndrome. Perfectly happy. Quite frankly, I'm at home in my shell. Yeah, I know there are some disadvantages, but so what? Still me. I'm happy being what I am. Number 20 is unique sensitivities. What makes an Aspie, or what is it like to be an Aspie? We have unique sensitivities that others just don't seem to get. There are some things that, there are a lot of things that I just don't get about neurotypical people. We already talked about a lot of them. The social climbing. I don't get it. I've said often, I have no idea how other people fight or even why they fight, but they do and they're good at it. They know the intricacies of fighting each other. That is something that I just don't catch. I just don't get. But there are things about people with Asperger syndrome that other people just don't catch, that other people just don't get. So, for example, we are challenged when it comes to reading faces and reading body language. People don't understand how that works. Again, this is that symbiotic relationship that we have with other people. They don't get us, we don't get them, and that's probably a good thing overall. It's a benefit to humans. That's why we're here. You know, we're a part of it. I mentioned Tipple Grandin earlier. She is an expert in animals, and she's very observant. And she noticed that animals are easily distracted.
Now, how many people there noticed that that animal was locked onto that sunbeam like radar?
And she became somewhat, I would call it an animal psychologist. I don't think she uses that term, but, or it might be a cow whisperer or whatever, whisperer. Why do they have the horse whisperer, the dog whisperer. That means you kind of understand the psyche of critters. Well, her specialty seems to be cows. I guess there are others, but it seems to be cows. And she noticed that cows and all animals are easily distracted. And one of the reasons that they would have difficulty herding cows through a channel is they would become distracted. There would be a shadow on the ground, or maybe a bit of sunlight, or maybe there would be a tree, or maybe there would be a truck, or just anything, a person, whatever, and that would distract them, and they'd stop in their tracks. So she made a chute, if you will, that just just two walls on either side of the cow, for like a path that had a wall on each side of it, for the cows to walk through, and it was just that simple. I think she called it, like two cardboard boxes or two cardboard walls on either side. I don't know, they're not cardboard, but that was her example, if I recall it correctly, and it's kind of cool because it worked. That's her contribution to the world. So we have these unique abilities, and other people don't get it. They no more understand us than we understand them. And sometimes that comes across as brutal. Some people I know with Asperger syndrome have an amazing sense for art. Not me. I like to draw. I like to piddle around with art, but I'm not good at it. Let alone excellent at it. But some people are. They just have that knack. Some Aspies understand visual things. Good at, some are very good, for example, at interior decorating. Landscaping. Number 21 is what's it like to be an Aspie? Well, if you are an Aspie, chances are you've got to deal with this thing called sensory overload. When I was a kid, I've mentioned this a lot of times, but when I was a kid, there were some things that I just didn't like. And I grew up in the 50s and early 60s when boys wore short hair. I mean, a burr haircut. Are you old enough to remember those? Well, I guess they still have them, only nowadays they kind of shave their heads. But burr haircuts were acceptable, were the norm. Flat tops, remember flat tops? Anybody that old? Some people, I still see some people with them. Can't think the last time I did, but, I know I've seen them around now and again. Flat top haircuts. You were expected to wear your hair short. That was a style. There was no such thing as a guy with long hair. I mean, the length of my hair right now would be unacceptable. In the 1950s and 1960s, you always had to get these haircuts. I hated haircuts. The problem with haircuts was I didn't like the feel of the razor, the clippers, when it cut my hair. But what was far worse than that was these tiny little prickly hairs would fall all over you. And even though they would wrap your neck around with some kind of a covering, and they would pin it tight, it didn't help. I still got those little hairs all over me, and they were torment. I absolutely hated it. Now, this is a contradiction for me when I was a kid because I also hated to take baths. But when you had a choice between those prickly little hairs and taking a bath, I was in the bathtub quick. I wasn't a very good swimmer, but if there was an opportunity to go to the pool and swim, nothing would get rid of those prickly little hairs and a dip in the swimming pool. I hated that. Another thing I hated was dress clothes, and I've mentioned this a lot of times, but when I was a kid, you get dressed on Sunday morning. The thing I hated about dress pants, and my mom made me wear these horrible, tormenting black dress pants. Now, all the other boys wore like identical clothes. When you go to church, doesn't seem to bother them, but man, they drove me crazy. And what was particularly weird was when I get dressed, I'd put on my socks first. And the reason is because the cuff, the hem, whatever, of the pants really irritated my ankles when I put them on. Just the feel of that fabric against my skin. So the way I would avoid that is to put on my socks first, and I didn't have to feel it. And my socks felt fine. Some of the things that never appealed to me because of sensory overload that made me a little bit abnormal, and as we like to say, everybody's abnormal, so it's normal to be abnormal, but I never cared for raucous music or rock music. Popular music I was okay with, depending on what it was, but loud music that you would dance to, and there's something about it that just wasn't pleasant to listen to. If it didn't have harmony to it or something that was really catchy, okay, I could get into that. I thought the Beach Boys were great. That was music that I could get into. But the Beatles, just rock, it's just noise to me. I didn't like it. And I know back then that adults would say, that's not music, that's noise. And I'd agree with them. Yeah, it's not music. I don't want to hear it. And I'd play the radio. I remember you used to have radios in your car. I'd play the radio when I was a teenager, drive around, and most of the time I'd keep it turned down because I didn't like the music. But then I'd play a song, you know how that goes. Play a song you like, and you turn it up. One place you would never, ever catch me was at a dance. It was a double whammy. Number one, there was a social component where I just didn't fit in, didn't want to go there, didn't want to be awkward, didn't want to be left out, and I didn't like the music. And I sure wasn't going to dance because I was... I still am, uncoordinated. I look silly dancing. I think because I can't actually remember dancing, at least not that kind of dancing, so it just wasn't me.
I saw you, Mark. You were dancing. You were
not allowed on Baptist.
What is it like to be an Aspie number 22 is meltdown. Now, some people, when they see a person with Asperger's syndrome having a meltdown, what they will conclude is that this individual is, they see them as kind of threatening, like there's a good possibility that they are going to be attacked. And their natural response is defense. And sometimes the defense is to call security. What triggers those meltdowns? And I don't have them nearly as frequently as I used to, but sometimes ruminating, thinking about things that you find very unpleasant in your past, and next thing you know, you're going through this meltdown. Get control of it, and usually I do because I recognize it fairly easily, but in public, that's kind of embarrassing. People call the cops on you. They turn around and stare at you like, what's wrong with you? This is not a good situation. But what triggers that sometimes is ruminating, but also just being in a stressful environment, being around other people. I notice that when I visit airports, that's not a good place to have a meltdown, seriously. Well, my meltdowns they're noticeable. It's very obvious that it kind of looks like somebody is throwing a temper tantrum. Best way I could describe it. Maybe I'll have one for you on video. But you can't do that at an airport because people they're walking on eggshells to begin with because of, things that have happened in the past. And in airports, security is watching every person all the time, every time you go in there. And if you do something out of line that is not normal behavior, they're onto you. And the last couple times I was at an airport, it wasn't long before I was being followed around by security. One time they were uniformed, and other times they wore uniforms, but they didn't look, didn't look like police. They just wore these black uniforms, but you could tell who they were. And they keep a close eye on you. They don't know. I mean, how do you explain that? Oh, excuse me, I'm autistic and I act crazy sometimes. Whatever, but we have meltdowns. Now, several years ago, we knew this couple, my wife and I knew this couple that had a grandson who was autistic. And he wasn't Asperger's, he was autistic. I don't know what level he was. But I told this story several months ago. But while we were there, we went and played miniature golf. And the little boy, I think he was maybe 7 years old, somewhere around there, 7, 8, that age range. He didn't get the game. To him, what was fun was just taking his putter, and just batting the ball around. He was having a blast. And Grandpa tried to show him, no, that's not how you play the game. And he had a meltdown. And after that, I wondered who was having the meltdown. Was it the little boy or was it Grandpa? Grandpa was having kind of a meltdown because the little boy wasn't doing it right. And the little boy was having a meltdown because Grandpa wasn't doing it right. And it occurred to me that, well, maybe people with autism, in a sense, speak a different language. His language was, I want to have fun batting the ball around. Grandpa's language was, you hit the ball in the hole, or you try to. Usually takes me more times than, I get my money's worth, put it that way. So number 23, that is stimming, S-T-I-M, short for stimulating. If you want to know what stimming is like, what it's like to be an Aspie, and you don't quite understand it, here's what I suggest you do. Just go sit in a rocking chair. And it's not long before, you just can't help it. You start rocking back and forth, or sit in a swing. Porch swing maybe, and you just start swinging back and forth. You are stimming, you are stimulating. So I guess everybody seems to do it under circumstances, but people with Asperger syndrome, my thing is rocking back and forth, but people with Asperger syndrome tend to be stimmers. Why do we do it? Because it is a calming effect. Now stop and think about this, using the rocking chair as an example. As an illustration, what you are doing when you are rocking is you are relaxing. When I was a kid, I say that a lot, don't I? But my earliest memories was being held by my mother as she sat in a rocking chair, and she would rock back and forth. Sometimes she would sing. Why did she do that? Trying to put me to sleep. Why? Because of the calming effect. So when you see somebody stimming, see them rocking back and forth, whatever, one of the things that you might want to think of is the person's in the rocking chair. Now, stimming comes in different forms. In fact, I went to a website and I found a link that listed some of the things about stimming and some of the ways that they do it. And it's kind of interesting, all the things they do. But some of the things they listed were hand and finger mannerisms. Some people shake their hands, some people do things with their hands. Some people, it's body movement. That would be the rocking, back and forth like I do. One would be posturing. Holding hands or fingers at a weird angle or an unnatural, abnormal angle. Visual stimulation. Looking at things sideways. I used to stare at people. I didn't realize I was doing it because, as far as I was concerned, I was watching a movie. This wasn't real. These people didn't notice I was looking at them because when you watch a movie, the actors don't know you're looking at them, but yeah, they did. So sometimes the actor would look back and they were not happy with me staring at them. So I think maybe that was a type of stimming, but I didn't actually lean my head sideways. Repetitive behavior is something else they listed. such as opening and closing doors and flipping switches. Now, I can't say that I've ever done that. Chewing or mouthing objects. Maybe, just maybe. Chewing gum is a form of stimming. I mean, why would you chew gum? Why else would you do it? I mean, the flavor lasts, what, 10 seconds? I think maybe chewing gum is a form of stimming. I don't know, but maybe it is. So, kind of like rocking. Everybody does it to some degree, it seems. Or listening to the same song or noise over and over again. If it's a popular song that I really like, yeah, I play it over and over and over again. But you don't have to be an Aspie to do that. I heard of a woman one time, and she got this song back when it was Islands in the Stream, Dolly Parton and what's his name? Kenny Rogers. And she would play that record. They said, I never saw her, but people talking about it. They say she played that record all day long, over and over that song, over and over and over and over again. She really got into it, but I think eventually she got tired of it. Do you see those two rectangles on the screen? Click on those, and the conversation just keeps on going. But if you're done, well, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see y'all next time.